Now we come to the interesting subject of Robert Frank's Americans. Robert Frank grew up in Switzerland and brought his young eyes to rest on the fresh subject of the United States of America, a subject most un-Swiss. His photographs, when he made them, were called un-American by some sensitive Americans. You may now judge that for yourself. His book, The Americans, has been republished, and an exhibition of his life's work has been traveling across the country. It opens at the University Art Museum in Berkeley, California this week.
I would like to reveal more and to push further, to show it with more, with more knowledge of what I photograph, and to get people to trust me more in the way I photograph them.
In 1955, Robert Frank took his small handheld camera and began a journey through America. This is the America he saw. New York. Detroit. New Orleans. The America Robert Frank saw was funny and sad, dimly lighted, and often lonely. His friend, the writer Jack Kerouac, wrote about him, "With that nice little camera he raises and snaps with one hand, he sucked a sad poem right out of America onto film." Tall, thin cowboy rolling butt outside Madison Square Garden, New York for rodeo season. Sad, spindly, unbelievable. That little old lonely elevator girl looking up sighing in an elevator full of blurred demons. What's her name and address? After seeing those pictures, wrote Kerouac, you end up finally not knowing anymore whether a jukebox is sadder than a coffin. This is how Robert Frank describes his photographic journey.
It was just a travelogue, and it happened to be a little bit different kind of a travelogue. It wasn't one where the sun always shone.
Robert Frank published his photographs in 1959 in a book called The Americans. The book shocked a lot of people with its gritty, unblinking vision of American life. One critic called it a wart-covered picture of America. Another said his photographs constituted a slashing and biting attack on American institutions.
I didn't like a lot of things, but I didn't go out and say, these photographs are against McCarthy or against Republicans. I didn't think much of Eisenhower. So, you select a few pictures, you put those in that document that feeling that you have about it. But it wasn't, I think I was passionate about losers. That was maybe the political, that people that were taken advantage of, that really couldn't make it, that would never make it. Those people I felt passionate about.
Robert Frank's passionate vision of America 30 years ago is now on a journey of its own through American museums and galleries.
The places that one would...
Ann Tucker of the Houston Museum of Fine Arts is the curator of the exhibition.
Places. He never photographed the Empire State Building or the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone or any of those things which one would expect a book about America to include. That was one of the great criticisms of the book when it was published, because people felt that a book called The Americans was too subjective and too lacking of those pictures that show America as a powerful, as a wealthy, as a positive, as an inspirational country. That was not the America of Robert Frank.
One of the most interesting aspects of this exhibition is they show a number of contact sheets, the small succession of photographs he took of a single scene. Photographs that are famous.
Evan Turner is director of the Cleveland Museum of Art, one of the stops on the tour.
Process worked, and certainly he looked at his world with an originality and an intensity that no other photographer had done. He was free of romanticism. He wasn't looking, if one can use a good old-fashioned expression, he wasn't looking for sunshine, fruit, and flowers everywhere. He was looking for a vibrancy of life which he felt was part of America.
Robert Frank's photographs, like the writing of his friends Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg, and the work of other artists of the Beat generation, changed the way Americans viewed themselves.
And he saw an America that, quite frankly, has affected our own vision of this country, our own vision of what a great photographer can do, as few artists in our day have done. Then abruptly, having solved, you might say, that point of view, he then stopped photographing for a while and began his work in video and films. And quite frankly, you can't begin to understand Robert Frank if you don't take into account the films. They have a lot to tell us.
Is baseball holy? Alan sang, Bishop, the holy flowers holy, is the world holy?
The first film Frank made was called Pull My Daisy, written and narrated by Jack Kerouac. The actors are Allen Ginsberg, Albert Leslie, and Larry Rivers, fellow artists engaged in stirring up the established art world with the wild spoons of the Beat generation.
And car holy, and light holy, is holy holy, are you holy?
The journey of Robert Frank's later life has been a journey inward. Sick of Goodbyes is about the accidental death of a daughter.
Sick of Goodbyes, which is about being older and losing so many of your friends, people that you are close to, people that you miss, people that it changes your life not to have them there for you anymore. In this particular one, he is painted on the photograph or painted on a piece of glass so that it is reflected in the photograph. It holds a small Mexican Day of the Dead like skeleton figure which symbolizes the death of which he is referring.
It's fascinating that in the latest photographs, the puzzles they may present the thoughtful viewer, one can sense the puzzlement that 30 years ago people had with the Americans, because they are as challenging today in terms of what photographers are doing now as earlier the Americans were original.
Robert Frank, now well into his 60s, is still experimenting, still moving on.
You know, life is different. You go to different rooms. I don't think you go back to that room you occupied once, if you can help it, not to go back. I would have a very hard time to become a photographer like I used to be. I think it would almost be impossible for me to do. I'd rather would dig a ditch or something.